We have to talk about TenZ. So it's just been announced that TenZ has been officially benched for the rest of the first split of the 2023 season, and Marved is taking his place on the roster moving forward. And this is a move that I could see coming from a mile away, because after making the switch and having Marved sub in for TenZ, they pushed Loud to a very competitive 3-game series and then went on to absolutely dominate MIBR 2-0 in really two maps that were not even close, with Marved coming in and absolutely dominating, top fragging, top rating, top ACS, just absolutely crushing MIBR. And it really looks like with Marved on the team, Sentinels is a completely different animal moving forward. So let's talk about the roster as a whole first. With TenZ on the roster and Zekken on the roster, both players are very aggressive, very kind of duelist focused players. Of course, we know that TenZ is essentially a jet specialist, as none of his other agents have looked particularly good. And Zekken is sort of more of a flexible player. He's played Sova, he's played Raze, he's played kind of a little bit of everything, but he certainly seems to be at his best when he's on sort of a playmaking style of character. His Raze is one of the best in North America. His Jet was maybe a little bit lackluster at times when he was on Xset, but he's certainly a skilled enough player to get a ton of value out of that character, despite not having the best op play in the game. That being said, as a coach, I think you're probably going to value a player who can slot into a bunch of different metas moving forward. And so with that in mind, I would probably pick Zekken over TenZ 100% of the time if I was going to be building a roster. Also, I think it's really worth talking about the meta as a whole, because with Loud kind of leading the way, we've kind of moved into this situation where we're seeing a lot of dual controller compositions coming out, whether it's the Harbor and the Viper and the Astra, the Omen and the Viper. A lot of teams and a lot of the maps seem to be playing in a way where having two controllers is extremely strong. And when you have a player like Pancata on your team, and then you also have a player like Marved on your team, it seems like you're really set up to be extremely successful when you have two of maybe arguably the two best smokes players in the entire world on your roster. So you might as well utilize that. So when I tweeted this out, there's no universe where Marv doesn't become a full-time player for Sentinels for the rest of VCT Americas. I wasn't really, Nostradamus. I think that is a pretty basic move that if you are looking for success, you would make, especially considering how much everybody else seems to have fallen into their comfort roles with the addition of Marved on this roster. Sentinels is no longer forcing double duelist. They're kind of just allowing their players to play the roles that they're the best on, and surprise, surprise, everything seems to be going much better. And I don't want to spend too much time just hammering the stats, but I think it is worth looking at the fact that Marved has stepped in, played 100 rounds, and is suddenly the second highest rated player in all of VCT Americas, just barely behind Auspice. And I mean, that's just an incredible thing for somebody stepping in kind of last minute with almost no practice with the team and performing at such a high level. And it is also worth noting that TenZ is the second lowest rated player in the entire league currently. Now, I really want to stress this. TenZ is an incredible talent. He's incredibly mechanically gifted. His highlight plays, I think, are legitimately responsible for sort of popularizing Jet and kind of making Valorant this flashy game early on. And I think a huge part of the Sentinels brand was built around TenZ being sort of the face of the organization and making these crazy highlight plays that propelled them to winning the Masters Reykjavik and kind of becoming the first super team in Valorant. But I also think that sort of style of play has been really the downfall of TenZ as the game has matured, because we're no longer in a place where a single player can kind of just take over the game and carry it, and people are learning to deal with Jet. They've had to learn to deal with Chamber for a year and a half. So being able to just kind of outskill people is not something that really happens that much in Valorant, because everybody is so much better with utility, and the team play has gotten better and the strategies have gotten better. So the 2020 and 2021 TenZ is no longer effective in 2023 because the game has just evolved. And unfortunately, it's just really hard to change your playstyle, especially if it's just something that you've been doing for your entire career. So I'm not surprised that TenZ has kind of fallen off in performance. With TenZ being removed from the active roster, I think for a lot of fans, there's going to be some questions about, how can you do this? He kind of has been the brand for Sentinels. But to that, I really have to say winning kind of solves all issues for most teams, and especially for most fan bases. At the end of the day, Sentinels fans want to see success. And yes, they want to see success for TenZ, but there's nothing worse than being a fan of a team that is getting clowned on. And I think in the video, Kaplan actually makes a really good point, which is that the season is super short. Remember, this is the very first official VCT season. Yes, we've had a couple of years of competitive Valorant, but this is kind of the new era, right? This is where Riot is really investing in the game. This is where teams are really invested in the future of this game. This is an esport that is being planned to last for years, right? League of Legends has been around for 10 years as a competitive esport, and Valorant is looking towards the future. So making your name right now, establishing yourself as the premier team, establishing yourself as a dynasty early on in VCT is even more important than it was in the previous couple of years of the game. 5 years from now, will teams even remember about, 2020 and 2021 Sentinels? Probably not. By then, we'll have some much bigger storylines. There will have been some even bigger tournaments. There will be some even bigger names. People will have done crazier and crazier things. There's only one Masters tournament of 4 champions this year. And so it's really important for teams and orgs and brands to do things that will put them in a place where they can be successful moving forward. Remember, we're still at a place where esports is not a profitable business for these orgs, and one of the fastest ways to jumpstart your success and become a profitable team is to be the best. One of the reasons that Sentinels has been successful in the first place is that they were the best team for the first year of this game existing. I really do believe that a player like Zekken kind of has the potential to be the future star of this game. He could realistically be the next TenZ, but even better, because not only is he incredibly mechanically gifted, he's flashy, he does crazy things, but he has potential for longevity. I mean, look at his agents played even this season. Every agent he's played has been great. And if we look at his historical stats, we can see it's all over the place. This guy is going to last through the next meta, and the next meta, and the next meta, and the next meta. Whereas a player like TenZ, unfortunately, has basically 2 agents that he plays. And that's just not enough. If you want to be a tier 1 pro in Valorant, you basically just have to have access to a wide variety of options if you want a long career in this game. There's too many factors that you need to continually adapt to simply play 1 or 2 agents. And the craziest part of all of this is Sentinels is making this move to seemingly level up their team with one of the easiest remaining schedules left of any team in the VCT Americas. Sure, they do play Cloud9, who has looked impressive this season, but I do think that that is potentially a winnable game. And then after that, we've got Evil Geniuses and Crew, who are 2 of the bottom 3 teams in the league, followed by Furia, who has kind of been on a downward trajectory and seems to be one of those teams that can be very hot and cold depending on how their emotions are flowing on a current day. So I can legitimately see Sentinels winning all 4 of these games, and then at the very least 3 out of the next 4 to put themselves in a really good spot as we go towards the playoffs. But I do think it's absolutely worth noting that the pressure that Sentinels, Marved, and the rest of the team is now under is going to be potentially even more immense than it was for TenZ and the team coming into the season, because Sentinels has seemingly made the ultimate sacrifice, right? They've benched their most beloved player, kind of the face of their brand. So realistically, if Sentinels were to stumble, the stakes are higher than ever at this point. For the CEO down, the entire brand is potentially at stake if they make this change and don't continue their upward trajectory. That's a lot of pressure to deal with. And so I gotta say, I truly wish them the best, because it's going to be a crazy end to the season.